Hello and welcome everybody to our inaugural Vegan FTA live panel. This is a new regular series in which we'll be covering the big issues we are facing as a movement. Today, we are proud to host a discussion on the role of animal-based research and testing and how it affects all of us. What purpose does it serve? And more importantly, what each one of us can do about it. I'm your host, Gareth Skirt, and joining me, as always, is my wife and co-host, Jackie Norman.
Hello.
And it's a pleasure to introduce our panel of experts today. We have Dr. Aysha Akhtar, co-founder, president, and CEO of Centre for Contemporary Sciences.
We have Rachel Smith, who is the CEO of Humane Research Australia.
And we also have Tara Jackson, Executive Director of the New Zealand Anti-Vivisection Society. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
It's lovely to have you.
Yeah, it's so wonderful to bring so many experts together on this issue. So, viewers, if you have any sort of questions for our panel, feel free to ask them in the comments, and we will try and address them throughout the show. But please get involved. It's lovely to see so many people already tuning in.
Yay!
So, to begin this discussion, I'd like to address the anthropocentric nature of mainstream culture and find a meeting point on this issue. As an organization, we like to keep our focus on the animals. But when it comes to an industry that remains so well hidden from the general public, we feel it's prudent to talk about the human connection to this industry. And with the development of new drugs and cosmetics often taking the limelight in terms of general knowledge of animal-based testing, I'd like to hear from each of you about an area of animal-based research that affects the everyday person's purchases or lifestyle. Do you want to get from there, my love?
Oh, I thought you... I'm sorry. Yes, Caroline, it is all to help animals. You are absolutely right. And Tara, we'll start with you, if I may. You recently wrote an article for us, thank you very much, discussing how New Zealand's emissions reductions plan is actually increasing animal-based tests being done here, primarily for the sake of keeping profits high with our meat and dairy sector. Would you like to speak a little about this area and how by buying these animal products, people are also actually paying for animal testing?
Yeah, so I actually think this is one of the most surprising things for people to learn, really, especially Kiwis living here in New Zealand, because often when people think of animal experimentation, they imagine lots of rats and mice being used. But here in New Zealand, cows are actually the most commonly used animal in animal experimentation. And they're normally the most commonly used animal every year, with the exception of a couple of years, like the latest stats we got from 2020, the most commonly used animals were fish. But the overall trend, really, of the most used animals, they're all animals that are exploited in farms as well. So, cows and fish, people eat those animals and use their bodies for all sorts of things. So I think that's a huge sort of surprising link for people, that when it comes to eating animals, particularly here in New Zealand, there is a strong link to animal experimentation. And whether that be animal experiments for improving the profitability of exploiting them, or sort of decreasing the negative impacts that exploiting those animals has on the environment. And that's what the emissions reduction plan is all about, really. It's pumping millions of dollars into this type of research, which, I mean, in my opinion, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a problem that we already know how to fix, right? Like, we're pumping all of this money into research to try and better exploit these animals, to decrease their negative impacts on the environment, when the government could really be promoting a reduction in animals, or, I mean, dream world scenario, they could be promoting Kiwis to go vegan. But I definitely don't think our government is particularly ready for that, or maybe our society isn't either. But put simply, the impact vegans are having is by not buying animal products, vegans are helping decrease the demand for those cruel animal experiments. So if we didn't eat animals, then the need for experiments to make farming animals as profitable as possible, it wouldn't exist. And there are, like, and here in New Zealand, there are some like Crown Research Institutes that that actually do research based on what society wants. So if we want to eat animals, they'll use animals typically exploited on farms and research. But if we as a society demand better, then more ethical vegan products, then their research would shift to be on that.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for that insight. And I think for more of us, we might have friends, relatives, or people we come in contact with who are against animal testing, but then just don't realize that connection of, that's going into your milk, your steak, your whatever else you want to whatever else you want to consume that comes from an animal. There's that level of testing there. And so I'll check the link to the article in the comments as well if anybody does want to check that out as well, because it's a lovely, well, not a lovely read, it's a brilliant read.
Yes.
Not a lovely thing that's happening, but
it's great that it's raising awareness and getting out there as well. And poor cows, as if cows don't go through enough as well to find that they're one of the most tested on animals is I
think some of us might have seen the photos of the what do they call it, the fistulated cows with the hole cut in the side. It's brutal what they do. So next, Aysha, I'd love to. Previously, you served as Deputy Director of the U.S. Army Traumatic Brain Injury Program, developing the Army's brain injury prevention and treatment strategies for soldiers. So during that time, you were able to see how, despite them putting hundreds of millions of dollars every year into creating head injuries in animals for research, it's not resulted in a single treatment for human head injury. This is just one of many examples of how the actual tests which are done on animals fail to be relevant to humans. Animal-based testing results in a 90 to 95% failure rate just in vaccine and drug development. So without the curiosity type and other experiments, from your time working with not just the Army, but multiple government bodies, have you seen taxpayers' money used to produce any sort of benefit for those who are actually funding it?
So in the United States, about, I would say, and I'm making a guess here because we don't have transparency on animal experimentation, how many animals are used, how much of our funding goes towards it, and or if our tax dollars goes towards funding animal experiments. There's very, very little transparency. But we can guess and estimate that anywhere between a half to 2/3 of the animal experiments that happen in the United States are in the category of basic research. And this is curiosity-driven research. I mean, this is the research the experiments that are done in academic universities and labs. This is not for drug development or vaccine development. This is not life-saving, and when people even think about life-saving research, although the researchers will always say their research has the potential one day to, lead to this, this, and this, and they just tack on a bunch of things just to justify their work. But it's anything from the shock experiments with animals and addicting monkeys to cocaine and rats and seeing how rats treat each other and how much empathy they have for each other by shocking them or drowning them in front of each other, and those kinds of experiments. And so it's really quite dismal, and you can imagine that just most animals in the United States are not even covered by the one law we have, which is the Animal Welfare Act, which is not it's a pathetic act in the first place. But even that doesn't even cover the majority of animals that are used in experiments. And for those animals that are used in experiments, the law does not at any way restrict the type of experiments that can be conducted on animals and how much suffering they may experience. So anything can and arguably has been done to animals in the name of research here in the United States. Now, the 1/3, maybe 1/4, I don't know, of animals used are for drug development and vaccine development, and that's where that figure comes in that you mentioned, Gareth, the 90 to 95% failure rate. So the Food and Drug Administration is the regulatory body that oversees all the testing and either allows a drug or vaccine to go to market or prevents it. And they pretty much always ask for every new drug and vaccine to have been tested on at least 2 different species before they will allow them to continue on to human clinical trials. So every drug vaccine has to be tested on 2 different types of animals. Despite that, when the drugs or vaccines do get to human clinical trials, 90 to 95% of them fail. So that means that despite the fact that 90 to 95% of the drugs and vaccines that were found safe and effective in animals, they end up being unsafe or ineffective in humans. And so that's a huge, huge failure rate. I mean, can you imagine if you hopped on a plane and the pilot said, all right, strap down because you have less than 5% chance of landing safely at your destination? Everyone would jump off and demand an overhaul of the entire airline industry. But that's not happening when it comes to drug development. So, well, not to the degree that it should. But there is, I will say, there is a slow growing momentum that is happening in which more and more, and this is coming from the scientific community, saying that animal experimentation is not predictive of what we're going to find in humans. We need to have better types of testing methods that are based on human biology. So we're not talking about human experiments here. We're talking about methods that actually capture the essence of the human body in 3-dimensional architect systems, and you can screen for drugs and vaccines to see how well they work. You can study diseases, you can study biological processes, and so on. And they have the potential to be far more effective.
Yeah. Wow. It's I look forward to talking more about that, because I know all 3 of you are working in this wonderful field of changing the dynamic of testing and research and taking it away from the animals. And just recently, I've been reading Animal Liberation. For folks who haven't read it, please go and read it, from Peter Singer. And when we're doing the research for this and learning more about your history with these government bodies and just the ineffectiveness of it, it really brings to mind a section in this book where they're talking about the nuclear war tests they're doing on rhesus monkeys, and the scientist in charge of it. I won't bother trying to find it in the book. I've got too many bookmarks in it. But he was saying about, he started to get conflicted about it and trying to figure out why, like, what were the actual results of this, because they've been testing all this radiation, everything on these monkeys, with the idea that they're providing invaluable resources for the US Air Force, so that they could, measure their fighting capability if a war was to break out. And so it got to the stage where he kept on asking, so what are these tests going to be used for, And the guy's like, yeah, well, we're going to tell pilots, that they have this amount of percentage to be able to fight in these conditions. And then the guy's like, well, it's tested on monkeys now. And there's like, we're not going to tell them it's tested on monkeys. And so even that information that they spent years developing was set on rhesus monkeys, which they were then going to tell humans as well that this is based on humans, and it wasn't even the case. So it's just it's just ludicrous once we go down this sort of rabbit hole of everything that's going on in this industry. And so, it blows the mind.
Definitely. It's crazy. But, another thing that's mind blowing, I think, is the number of animals that, are being tested on at any one time. I mean, Rachel, I would love it if you could speak to us in regard to the sheer number of animals which are being used in research and experimentation. I think it's estimated that over 100 million animals are used in animal testing each year. That's just the ones that we know about or considered to be animals, with the US, China, and Japan being the top 3 contributors, I think. Humane Research in Australia is currently running a number of campaigns, which we will talk about. But for the purpose of this question, what do you think will be the estimated death toll from the forced to smoke campaign? Regarding this experiment on mice, what scale of suffering are scientists perpetuating in order to learn the basic biological mechanisms underlying respiratory disease in humans? I couldn't believe it when I actually saw this on the Humane Australia website.
Yes, that estimate of the 100 million animals, it's use per year is very much an estimate, and as Aysha said, there's very limited transparency to get an accurate number. Looking at Australia, for example, we are also recording observational research, so that could inflate the numbers, but at the same time, we're not recording the numbers that read in use, so it's very difficult to get a picture. And similarly, legislate the animals that they can to be, I guess, differ between states. So some may include fish, for example, whereas others won't. And it's not mandatory in some states to report on the use, whereas it is in others. So we have no national consistent method to be able to evaluate how being used and whether that changes from year to year, which is a big obstacle. And that also relates to trying to track the numbers that are used for this particular about smoke inhalation. We have a campaign focused on a particular type of exposure called the nose-only exposure. So mice are placed in a very narrow tube, and that's then put onto a machine, and the or rather has twice a day for 5 days a week for a period of up to about 8 weeks. And unfortunately, we can review publications and have an idea of which institutions may be using this and the numbers used for that particular type of project, but the level of detail that is collated as a regulatory requirement doesn't break down to the specific numbers used for those incidents. So we have asked the regulators, we've asked individual institutions for that information via freedom of information requests, but it's generally, well, consistently with us. We do have some information was obtained from the government of releasing adverse reports and some, as you expect, animal welfare implications and adverse response from that method, which all related to deaths of the animal via suffocation as they try and turn to escape in the tubes. There was a case.
Sorry, just to hold you up for a second, Rachel. I just wondered, do you want to try turn off your?
They've come out of the machines.
Got quite a bit of lag right now.
It being induced,
Sorry.
So they're inducing that would be associated with smoking. So they might die from that condition, or the end of the experiment through euthanasia. And it's very unlikely that they would be rehomed because they have nicotine.
Yes, sorry to cut you off there, Rachel. I was thinking maybe we might try. We've got a bit of lag happening, folks, so hopefully it's not coming across too bad on the broadcast. But maybe if you try turn off your video while we talk, Rachel, just because we're just getting so much lag that it's sort of cutting between the sentence. We'll just try that. Sorry. Technical difficulties brought to you by Vegan FTA. The protein deficiency in the internet, as we like to say. So, how does that go now for you?
Is it any better?
Well, I think what we'll do is if we move ahead to our next question, and then we'll come back to Rachel, and then hopefully things might go a bit smoother now. Then so we can actually we can hear everything, all the wonderful information being brought to us. So yeah, I'll run into the next one, eh?
I'll give one.
So right, cracking on. One experimental category called basic research, in which Aysha touched on before. I feel it's just the most mind-boggling because curiosity truly does kill cats, dogs, rabbits, sheep, indeed any creature deemed suitable for these experiments. While bearing witness to the animals experimented on is enough to make people make that ethical connection. Learning that many cruel and malicious tests are conducted simply out of curiosity, it churns the stomach. And I know some of the folks in the comments here have already been sort of saying about this. You know, the ethical thing alone is one, but yeah, blows the mind seeing what they're actually doing just to test random things, really. Sadly, I understand that this is one of the largest uses of animals in research too. It would appear our historic violent and barbarous nature has not ever left biological science. We kill, maim because we can, because it's acceptable to non-human animals, because it's allowed. So once again, we spoke on this a little bit before. Within the Animal Welfare Act, despite being predominantly the species exploited in research and testing, mice and rats are actually excluded from this act and not even counted as animals in it. In an effort to halt and eventually stop this field of research, could advocating for the inclusion of mice and rats into the Welfare Act be a stepping stone for us activists to disrupt animal testing?
Is that for me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, anyone can feel free to jump in.
People have tried. They've tried here in the United States to include mice and rats, and it's never worked. Unfortunately, the researchers say it's too burdensome. It's going to cost too much. It's too burdensome. It's going to slow research because they can't count all the mice and rats that they use, and birds and reptiles and all the other animals that are excluded from the Animal Welfare Act. I will say this. So I have been an advocate working on fighting the use of animals for more than 30 years, since I was in high school. And that's when I started. And what I have noticed is that, unfortunately, the arguments for the ethical treatment of animals isn't enough to really make sweeping changes when it comes to animal testing. It just is not. If people think that animal research somehow is going to save the life of their child, then they will fully support the use of animals. It doesn't matter what kind of animals, they will support it. And so what I really suggest is for every activist really to switch gears in this sense, and to focus on the human health, human ethical aspect of this. And what I mean is by showing that animal experimentation not only is unethical for animals, but it's also very unethical for humans. Because when you think about it, 90 to 95% failure rate. People enroll in clinical trials based on the assumption that the animal testing was going to protect them. And yet most clinical trials fail. And you can also think about the high cost of drug development, in large part because of this failure, leads to a high cost of pharmaceuticals for us. The consumers pay for this, right? Also, the high failure rate means that there are very little treatments actually being developed, right? Most of the diseases out there have no treatment approved whatsoever. And even for many of the diseases for which there is a treatment approved, the treatment is often marginally beneficial at best. For example, if we look at Alzheimer's disease, there are drugs out there that have been approved for Alzheimer's, but they barely do anything. They're useless, really. They might extend someone's lifespan by a few months, and that's it. So we think about, okay, so we need better treatments, and animal research is holding us back. The other thing to point out is because of the non-predictive nature of animal experimentation, there's a large concern that many drugs and vaccines that would have worked, would have been safe, may have actually been cures for humans, but they were abandoned early in the process because they didn't work in the animals that they were tested on. So we may have missed out on useful treatments, on cures, perhaps, because of misleading animal experiments. I really do believe that the momentum is building, and we need to help build this momentum, that we need to show how animal experimentation is largely ineffective for human health. It's not to say that it's never worked or we've never learned anything from it, because we have. I mean, how can you not? We've poured billions every year, just each country, billions of dollars into it. But if we were to ask what is the most effective way to understand human biology, the most effective way to understand how we get diseases, the most effective way to find the treatments we need research based on human biology, not on the biology of a rat or a dog or a monkey or a cat. So I think that despite, how much I cry and literally cry when I read about another animal experiment and the suffering that animals go through, I know that I just don't think that focusing on the suffering of animals is not going to lead to the changes we want fast enough. We need to start shifting gears and start focusing on the human suffering, because there is human suffering in regards to this ineffective research paradigm that the world has created. So that is how we're going to get people on board. That's how we're going to make changes. That's how we're going to see an end to animal experimentation.
Thank you. That's so well said. And yeah, it's something we're always trying to advocate for here in Vegan FTA, is using the whole spectrum in order to advocate. And so there are many times when, I always feel the health, the environmental, and the ethics are all sort of one wheel. And often there's, depending on who your target is and what your campaign is, you've got to choose one of those that's going to suit it best. And so evidently health is such a great way to go with it. And on one of the points you're making about the ineffective, Esther in the comments was saying about how penicillin was originally tested on guinea pigs and wouldn't have been brought out if they'd kept with that, because it killed the guinea pigs. So we wouldn't have had penicillin if it wasn't for changing.
Said if it had been, it wasn't, but if it had been tested on guinea pigs.
Yeah. I'm muddling my words to the best of my abilities today. Does anyone else want to weigh in as well on this point?
I can add like a New Zealand perspective in that we do include mice and rats in our Animal Welfare Act. And I would say that has not disrupted the system. It's given us a better indicator of how many animals are used. The mice and rats have one of the highest euthanasia rates. So we're talking like around the 80 to 90% of those animals get killed that are used. But on top of that, in New Zealand, we also monitor how many animals are bred, not used, and subsequently killed. And that includes mice and rats as well. So even going that sort of extra step, it hasn't disrupted the system in any way, I'd say. It just gives us that clearer view of how many animals are used. But I totally agree with everything Aysha has said. And that is why, at NZABS, our whole charity basically is set up with that sort of goal that we're going to end animal experimentation by pointing out the scientific invalidity that it has. But I would say that because this industry is so complicated, the use of animals in science is so broad, I think that's one of the hardest things to relay as well, is that while we have a huge failure rate in the likes of drug trials and using animals as models for humans, there are many other ways in which animals are used. Like in New Zealand is what I can speak to specifically, but the likes of veterinarian research, where they're actually using the animals in that research that they want to get the results on, right? So maybe it's not necessarily scientifically invalid, but it is unethical. So we I guess there is, what I'm trying to say here is, while that is the main argument, there are other ways in which we do have to push the ethical argument as well, because even if it is scientifically valid, we shouldn't be doing it on animals if it is harmful. But that's one of the big things we have to do when we're communicating with the industry, is we have to break it down and say, this is what we are against. So we say we're against animal experimentation and the harmful use of animals in science. So it captures everything. It's not just the cases that aren't scientifically valid. That's a little bit of from the New Zealand lens.
Thank you so much for that input. Rachel, did you have anything to add? I see you've rejoined us on your phone, so
yes,
hopefully...
looking a bit more animated now.
We're not getting your audio through at the moment.
Oh, no.
Oh, wait, there we go. I think it's coming through now.
You might have heard me saying, "Oh."
That was Taro.
Yeah.
We can see you really well.
I don't know if you're able to go to your settings and Unfortunately, we're just having a lot of problems with our ally and friend over in Australia. We're talking about
Tasman's been a bit rough on us this morning.
Yeah,
isn't it?
the Tasman Sea must be a bit rough this morning.
If we go into the next question, and if hopefully Rachel can join us again and answer this one as well, because the advancement of technology has allowed us to reach many new heights within our society. I've heard cases of human organs being 3D printed, and the creation of organ chips which can mimic critical body functions, both of which sound an incredible purpose for technology. What is the biggest obstacle that we're facing in the advancement of technology and its logical replacement of animals in testing? And how can we help each of you in advocating for that change?
I would say two main obstacles. One is culture. And what I mean by culture, I mean the culture within the scientific community. They're so entrenched in the idea of using animals. That's government, that's academic centers, that's drug development, that's chemical companies. They're just so entrenched. There's a bias towards using animals in experimentation. I mean, if you were trying to publish research in a scientific journal using organ-on-a-chip technology, for example, oftentimes the researchers will get denial from the publication because they want animal research instead. So there's a bias even in the scientific publications. The other thing is really, it comes down to money, and everything comes down to money. If our government were to put the money towards human biology-based testing methods instead of animal experiments, that's where the research will go. And that's really it. As long as academic centers can continue to get funding for their next shock experiment on rats, or the next head injury experiment on cats, if they can keep getting funding for it, they'll keep doing it. If, however, our funding agencies started to shift and say, no, we want more methods based on human biology, that's ultimately where the research will go. And then as far as for the drug development side, it's a change in mindset in regulatory agencies. They're very entrenched with the use of animal experiment, even knowing the high failure rate. They have a hard time seeing beyond animal experiments. So in the United States, there's a bill currently called the FDA Modernization Act of 2021. And it's passed the House here, and it's on its way, I believe, to passing the Senate. So we have a really high chance that this will actually become signed into law this year, which will be a major, major step. And basically what it does is that it doesn't take away animal experimentation, but it expands the type of testing methods that the FDA is supposed to allow from drug developers, so that if a drug developer thinks that using organ-on-a-chip technology is the best way to show the efficacy of their drug, then they can push and submit that to the FDA. Now, you're still requiring the FDA to accept it, but by law, basically this levels the playing field, gets us to leveling the playing field for organ-on-a-chip technology over animal research. So it's a step in the right direction. So regulatory action, money, and changing that cultural mindset. Those are the main barriers.
Brilliant. Yeah. And so is there anywhere where, for our activists and advocates, can they go to find out like who the grants are sort of coming from, and sort of a chain to follow there, so then we can advocate towards those grant sort of agencies?
In the United States, like I said, there's so little transparency. It's very difficult to find out exactly. Some people go and they get through the Freedom of Information Act, they get information about certain types of experiments and maybe how much funding went towards it. But it's like one experiment at a time. That's it. It's not a whole sweeping change. Here in the United States, I hope over the next few years to work with other organizations to try to kind of force our government agencies in one way or another to start shifting more funding towards these human-based human-based testing methods. And when we do, if there's anyone here in the United States that's listening to this, stay tuned to see how you can help And I don't know if Tara has some more direct answer for New Zealand.
Yeah, I'd say it's quite like everything you said is quite similar here. We've sort of identified 3 key obstacles that we're really targeting with our Striking at the Source campaign. So like it's the campaign name is speaks for itself, really. We're trying to strike at the very source of this industry and disrupt it so that we can actually start seeing change. Because if we look back over the past 20, 30, 40 years, things aren't changing, they're staying stagnant, and there are a lot of factors contributing to that. So we've kind of come in and said, right, what are those key obstacles? And they are outdated laws here. So in New Zealand, we still have requirements for animal testing in our law. And how are we meant to encourage other methods to be used when there's actually requirements for those animal-based tests to be used? So that's one of them. Then funding, which Aysha already mentioned. That's a huge problem here, in that, I mean, annually New Zealand's spending billions of dollars on research and development, and what we've been able to identify being spent on like non-animal based research, or could be used on that, should I say, because it's actually the 3 R's, which can also include refinement, but that's only about $55,000 of billions. So it's just uneven. It's completely uneven, and we're missing that financial incentive. We're also aware of cases that people have used animal tests because they felt that that's how they could get funded, or they didn't think that they would get published unless they used that specific animal test. Whether or not they agreed with it was irrelevant, or whether or not it produced any viable results was irrelevant in those cases. So yeah, the first 2, outdated laws, the lack of available funding, and then thirdly, Aysha also mentioned, and that's a lack of transparency and openness. So one of the big sort of contributing factors to this industry thriving is that people don't know about it. I mean, this stuff happens behind closed doors. We've got animal labs in like main city centres that we can walk past and not even know what's happening inside. And we really noticed the extent of that when we did a public poll in 2019 and learned that only about 36% of Kiwis even know that animal experimentation happens here. And that's a huge problem, because how are we meant to rally the troops and get Kiwis to actually fight for change when they don't even know that change needs to happen? A lot of people think that animal testing has been banned in New Zealand, but that it's actually just cosmetics. And to be honest, before that ban was enacted, we weren't actually testing cosmetics on animals. So number-wise, it didn't really have an impact. It was more of a future-proofing sort of ban. So yeah, there are sort of the 3 barriers that we've identified. Obviously, public awareness is a huge one as well. But we're targeting those barriers with our Striking at the Source campaign. And what we've done is we've made like an action plan that we're asking the government to sort of enact. We're wanting them to actually, from a government level, create an action plan where we phase out animal experiments as technology permits. So it's sort of creating a shared vision that everyone can be working towards, because I think when you actually meet with sort of key stakeholders, industry members in New Zealand, it's very rare that they disagree with the idea of working towards a world where animal experimentation doesn't happen. So what we've done is basically create it's like a list of 27 different key changes that we want. And we've sent a petition to the New Zealand Parliament with had over 22,000 signatures on it. And we're asking for those key changes to be made at the same time as we're waiting for the next steps at Parliament. So the next steps will be us giving a written submission and then hopefully an oral submission. And during that time, we'll need as many Kiwis as possible to back us and to sort of like echo our calls. And there'll be a lot of calls to action throughout that period as well. And the way people can be a part of that is by signing up to our mailing list so that we can let them know ASAP when things need to happen. So it's all about putting pressure on at the right time, right? So like the specific MPs or people in charge, we want to be directing a lot of people to it once so that they feel pressured to actually listen. So there'll be all sorts of online actions that we'll be asking people to do. And then sort of in the background, what NZAVS is also doing is where we do a lot of behind the scenes work, which is obviously a lot less glamorous than the cool stuff you see out in the public, but it has a pretty big impact. So we meet with a lot of these key stakeholders, we attend conferences and give talks. And I think one of the most important things we're doing at the moment is actually asking these key stakeholders, so universities, government research agencies, we're actually showing them our plan. So there's 27 key points, and we're saying, what do you think? What areas do you agree with, and what areas do you not agree with? And from that, we're finding that there is actually a lot of there's a lot of common ground. And I think it's a really smart way to sort of push for change, and being able to go to the government and saying, hey, across the sector, everyone agrees that there should be more money available for non-animal based research, for example. So we're trying to go about this campaign in the best, most effective way possible and get as much support for it as possible, not just from the public, but actually from the industry itself. So the key ways people can really help with that is signing up to our mailing list so that we can give them call to actions as soon as they come out, and following us on social media and sharing all of the important campaign work and other mahi that we do, so that we can improve that 36% rate of people knowing that it actually happens here.
Brilliant. Yeah, like there will be links towards, well, I've actually got one up now, a little scroller thing going, so you can see at nzavs.org.nz. Please head over there, but we will talk about this more as we push on forward. And for us, we were down in Dunedin whilst they were building the university new labs and stuff like that, and so we could see them putting in these huge black glass sort of slabs up there on the wall, which are basically supposedly windows. No one can see in, they can see out though. And the level of secrecy that's going on out here. And just, we love what you're doing with the collaboration of working with these industries to change these industries. And once again, it's something here at Vegan FTA, we're really trying to push across the board in all our advocacy, whether it's with animal-based research or whether it's working with farmers. We need that collaboration because we can't build this vegan world alone. We need to do it together. And so working with people towards that change is going to be a lovely way. Absolutely. But Rachel, did you have...
I was just going to say, as Aysha was saying this morning before we got on our live, cosmetics, which a lot of people focus on, is just a small part of animal testing. We need to be, as Tara said, striking at the source, addressing all animal-based research and experimentation and finding out more about all of them so that we can advocate better, which is what events like this are all about. Yeah. But yes, Rachel, do you want to try talking to us and see if we can hear you this time?
Yes, hopefully it's working.
Hey!
And change of phone onto my partner's phone. But really listening to the conversation, I can definitely see these common themes in terms of the obstacles. And really we find the key ones, I would say, would be lack of transparency. In the first question you posed to me about the numbers that were used in research and particular procedures, it's just really impossible to get that information. We try through different channels and freedom of information, for example, but it's frequently denied to us. And we try and obtain what information we can through publications, but they're about particular research projects rather than an overview of the total numbers used. So really that lack of transparency, and I would say lack of funding to incentivize non-animal methods. So in Australia, we don't have any government funding directed towards developing and validating human relevant methods. And we don't have a specific alternatives or replacement center as they do in the US and Europe and Asia. And we're really decades behind other nations in that and pushing for that quite heavily. So, I would say that they are the mammoth obstacles that we face in being able to gather information and act on that information and inform people about what's actually happening.
Wow.
It puts me in mind of animal agriculture, really, doesn't it? There's all this money and it's being put in the wrong places. There are alternatives that the government could be putting towards rather than just feeding all these harmful industries, because that's the way it's always been. One of my favorite sayings is tradition is just peer pressure from dead people, but it seems to just be perpetuating that. And I see a lot of parallels with animal, based research as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I really hope for all of our viewers as well. I'll swap over the banners too, so we can get to everybody's sort of website. But please, if it's somewhere relevant to your location, because I know we've got viewers from all around the world at the moment, if you're in Australia, please get and support the Humane Research Australia. Kiwis, let's get on to NZAVS. And for all of our fans from the United States, please support Aysha at the Centre for
Contemporary Sciences.
As well. So I'll bring that one up as well soon. But yeah, it's such a big challenge. I think all across the animal rights, animal liberation sort of movement, funding, it's a huge thing. We're up against so much established sort of wealth and funding on the other side. So, it's time we start working together to help switch that over and get it in the right place. Because it's, as I said, it's going to be better for all of us with the health side of things. We're going to actually get things that work for humans. It's going to be great for the ethical, because we'll be getting this, away from the animals. And then, I'm sure it can't be doing the environment much good either. Well, especially Tara's article, which I believe I linked earlier, speaks to that effect as well. So all the whole trifecta.
Can I just ask one wee question? I don't know if this is possible to find out, because you're saying how much is hidden and transparent. So, for example, a lot of us, especially even being vegan, we have to take medications. And I've been taking one for some time to deal with chronic pain. And I didn't realize until I was in the medical room at the weekend, and I got given another medication. And when I got home, I was like, well, I already take this medication. Does this work with that medication, or is there going to be interactions? And it was only on Googling that I found that the one that I'd been taking for some years, what animals it had been tested on and what these tests were. And after that, I was just thought, my God, well, I'm not taking that. I mean, that's, I felt hideous that I've been taking it for all that time. But how easy for us as the average consumer or patient to find out, what actually goes into producing the medicines that we take?
Well, I can definitely jump on that. So I don't know about anywhere else in the world, but I assume it's probably pretty similar. In the United States, every drug and vaccine is tested on animals. So if you're taking any pharmaceutical, prescribed medicine, vaccine for coronavirus, it was tested on animals. And so what I would say is, please do not use that as a reason not to take the medications you need. You need to stay healthy. You not taking medications is not going to change the system. So please take what you need. Stay healthy, live a good long life, especially if you're a vegan and you care about these issues, because we need as many people to fight these. And so just, don't not take the medications. Do what you need to do to protect yourself, protect your family, protect your health, and then fight the system in the ways that can be effective. Not taking medications is not going to be effective.
I totally agree with that. And another point to add is we don't have the luxury of having cruelty-free pharmaceuticals. It's not like cosmetics where we do. We can easily go and buy cruelty-free makeup, but we don't have that power yet as sort of consumers with pharmaceuticals. So I think it would be a real shame, like Aysha said, for people who do have that empathy and compassion for animals to not be looking after themselves, because these are the people that we need to exist for a very long time and help us fight for change. And I just linked in our sort of private chat an article that we wrote for a news outlet in New Zealand about how you can oppose animal testing and still have the COVID vaccine, because that was a big one that a lot of our supporters, I think, were battling with, was, can I take this vaccine knowing that it was tested on animals? And while, we're not health professionals, we're not going to ever tell someone, go and get the vaccine. It's each individual's person's choice. What we were wanting to say is, don't let the guilt of there being animal testing linked to it affect you, because to be honest, we just don't have another option. And we need to fight for those other options, like Aysha said, and the only way we can do that is if we're healthy and thriving. So
love it. Thank you so much for that.
I've just added it into the comments there if anyone does want to check that out as well, or either on YouTube or Facebook. But Rachel, did you have anything you wanted to add to this?
The regulatory system is the same for approval. Any drug on the market would have been tested on animals. So yeah, you don't have the opportunity to make a selection based on that criteria. The only thing I would add is, obviously some diseases are genetic, or you could have an accident and require medical help. But I think we all have a personal responsibility to try and, keep as healthy a lifestyle as we can and not smoke and other habits which may lead to diseases which may have caused unnecessary suffering. But as I said, it's some things are outside your personal choices. But I think preventative health is also an important thing to consider.
For sure, yeah. I think we see this in the health sort of movement a lot, especially from all our plant-based doctors and stuff like that. So saying, yeah, if you need surgery, get and have surgery. If you need these life-saving things, have them. Because we all need to be out there, as I said, as long as possible, because this is going to be a long fight. A long road ahead of us. But every day that we're here, we're learning new strategies and tactics. We're learning how to be more effective and efficient. Hopefully we can make that window a lot closer, but we need to be in it for the long haul as much as possible. And so, yes, folks, please do take care of yourselves whilst we're doing this. But keep fighting for the animals. So as we focus on strategies and tactics we can adopt to build solutions for ending animal-based testing, I feel it's topical to look at the MBR Beagle's actions, which are currently taking place at the time of recording this. At the time of recording, which I've already said, we can see grassroots collectives of just different groups of activists all coming together in order to create disruptions and put physical pressure on Marshall Bioresources breeding facilities. For anybody who doesn't know, MBR is Marshall Bioresources. Even just hearing the name for me when I learned that as bioresources, it goes to show the sort of lack of compassion there, I do believe. But basically, so they've been putting a lot of pressure on that. And, there's so many activists here listening in today who are all fighting to try and end animal-based testing. And we salute you all. But the MBR campaign is one that right now, which has just made big waves amongst the activist communities. So each one of us here today with the panel, I think we are all engaged in creating some legislative change for the animals and working in that. I think, Tara, you said it earlier about, that less dramatic, it's less adrenaline-fueled environment of paperwork and corresponding for change. Here at Vegan FTA, we believe we need both. We need the grassroots, boots on ground actions happening, and we also need that ink and email battles happening as well to hopefully get reform and abolishment, hopefully. So I'm curious to learn how each of you feel about having actions like the MBR protests working in collaboration with the legislative side of the change. For those of us who are not adept at navigating the legal and technical world, can we support change in animal-based research by highlighting the issues through physical presence and public demonstrations? Anyone like to jump in on here?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I agree. I think we need both. I just also want to emphasize that I think we need strategic actions where we have clear goals. And I do think they also always need to be non-violent. And that's something I really firmly believe. I don't think we're going to create long-lasting change by using fear. I don't think that's the right way to go about it. And I think historically within this particular movement, we have seen a lot of that, and it has created a lot of resistance from the industry itself to work with us, because they do have this sort of idea that we are almost kind of like dangerous people. I mean, there has been stuff done, not in New Zealand that I know of, but overseas where people have had like activists have shown up at people's homes or like planted bombs or, things like that we would never do because we're a non-violent organization, but it has sort of tarnished us in the work that we now try and do. So, I mean, and an example of the impact that can sort of have is we were campaigning to try and get one particular animal test banned, and an institute that was using it wouldn't even reply to my emails. We were just, we were a fringe group who weren't worth communicating with. Then I ended up being invited to attend a conference where they were at, and I spoke about that particular test. So face to face, they were able to hear what we had to say and that we're reasonable people who are non-violent and evidence-based. And at the end of that, they did approach me and say they'd be interested in finding a way to end the use of that test. So it changed from someone not even replying to my emails to actually approaching me in person and saying, hey, like, how could we possibly work together? And I think that's the kind of change I think we would like to be a part of, is working together in a collaborative, kind way and creating change that both sides feel empowered about, that can be permanent and last a long time, rather than fear induced. And maybe it'll create short-term changes, but in the long run, I'm not quite sure that's the best thing for animals. So yeah, I love direct action. I think it's great when people get out there and show that they care and that they're passionate. And you can see a lot of effective stuff with the likes of Greenpeace, where there's some really well thought out actions that have goals and purpose, and they tick them all off and achieve great things there. But I think you've got to be really mindful of, what are you trying to achieve? You don't just want to go and make a noise. You want to go and make an impact, right? So it's about finding the best way to go about it. And if you don't personally know, then reaching out to the organizations in your area that might, and asking how you could assist them. And, also, I love it when local groups in New Zealand check in with NZABS and say, hey, if we did this action, would it impact the work that you're currently doing? Because I think it's good to be mindful of what other organizations are doing as well. So short answer is yes, love it. Just A, be mindful, and B, be kind.
Brilliant. I love that about not making a noise but making an impact. And I think for some of those the negative references, if folks haven't already, there's the film The Animal People, and that talks about the Shack campaign, which yes, those things happened. The very grassroots sort of start of it, and then it just got so anybody could sort of join in, and then you get a few sort of extremists sort of getting in there. And yeah, there was a bomb outside one building, and all sorts of pressure campaigns on people's houses and such. And so there's a lot to learn from that, a lot of things of what not to do. And so, yeah, we've got Jake Conroy, one of the Shack members. He's coming up on our activist series in the future. So we have a good discussion about him and what he's learned from his time during that. And yeah, we need to be, if you want to be a militant vegan, be a strategist, think things through. And then, yeah, as I say, make an impact, not just a noise. But does anyone else have anything they want to weigh in on this topic?
I would just say, I feel like those actions, they really have increased public awareness about what's happening, and the undercover investigations and the protests. They've put pressure on the regulators to impose the penalties or increase the likelihood that those animals can be rehomed, or that the company would be held to account or potentially closed down. So I think that it's definitely effective. My only I guess point would be that it has to be in collaboration with other programs, because otherwise that facility will just close, and then another one will open somewhere else, and there'll be another protest. So we've got to keep working on changing the legislation and changing the lack of enforcement and encouraging non-animal methods alongside those actions. But I definitely see that they have had positive impact, and obviously helped those individual animals who would still be in there if it wasn't for those actions. So yeah, I would say I'm supportive, but it just has to be in collaboration with other things, and again, non-violent.
Brilliant. Yeah. Once again, folks, on the Vegan FTA, collaboration. That's how we'll move forward. We're going to work together. Aysha, do you have anything to cover on that, or should we move on?
No, I think Tara and Rachel said it nicely.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
Wonderful. Well, it leads on nicely to the next question, which is a strategy that we've adopted here at Vegan FTA in our advocacy for animals is forming relationships with sanctuaries in order to share the stories of their residents. We find that the animals are just fantastic ambassadors for their cause just by being their wonderful selves. And while they may not be able to speak our language, their images alone can really make an impact. Right to release is something that we see many anti-vivisection organizations working towards, and we're seeing results of this around the world. The primary reason to do this, of course, is to give these poor beings a chance at a happy life, which is devoid of suffering and exploitation at last. Is this also another avenue, however, in which we can reach the public through allowing the survivors to actually become ambassadors for those who are still entrapped within the research systems?
I have two minds, two thoughts about it. On one hand, I'm for saving any animal who, from suffering, and giving these animals a chance. I mean, to have some kind of a decent home, like my little cat that you see, my Nessie, you can see behind me. She's enjoying life. The other concern, though, that I have is that, first of all, it really only works for a few types of animals, right? It's usually beagles, they're the number one, and maybe some cats, maybe some rabbits, and only animals who are allowed to live at the end of the experiment or are considered surplus in the lab. The ones that are really experimented on, they're rarely ever going to be released, and that's the majority of animals. They're not going to be released. They're either killed at the end, or they're used again and again for experiments, or they've been infected with something purposefully that they cannot allow them to get out of the lab. The researchers can't allow them to get out of the lab. So it's the on one hand, these animals can act as ambassadors about, and show people some things about the industry. On the other hand, I'm a little worried that it might give people a false sense that, oh, animals are adopted out of the lab, it's not so bad, most animals get to have a good home and it's all good and well. And that is not the case. It's just a few animals that get adopted. It doesn't even tip the majority of animals that are used in experiments. So, I'm kind of divided, to be honest, about this type of strategy, this type of effort as a real strategy.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, and so in New Zealand, we in AVS in a charity called Hoo Ha, we teamed up with a campaign called Out of the Labs, and we're really putting pressure on the government to encourage rehoming. And from that, the number of animals actually rehomed is monitored, so we can actually see the number of animals being rehomed rather than unnecessarily euthanized. And the numbers are really small. It's a tiny amount that are actually rehomed. We're talking maybe like 100 a year sort of thing, compared to the odd 300,000 that are used, plus an additional 100,000 that are bred, not used and killed. So the number of animals being rehomed is very small. You're right there, Aysha. But I think that having those sort of numbers helps us, at least in New Zealand, really push the idea that this isn't the norm, that it's very few animals that are the lucky ones. When we sort of started that collaboration, we saw there's like 3 benefits really to this sort of work. And I mean, for a large part, it is seen as sort of like an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff sort of a campaign, which is why it could never be our only campaign. It's a side campaign that we do work in, but it can't be the only thing, right? But those key benefits are obviously the animals. So for those individual animals that we get to rehome, that's their whole life. There's no bigger impact than that being saved for them. The other one is obviously the public connection and turning those numbers and those statistics into real faces and real animals that people can connect with and feel something for. And then the third is more of a surprising one that we've sort of learnt as the campaign's progressed, and that is holding institutes accountable. And that when we actually start rehoming those animals, I think it helps teach those institutes that there are people out there who really value these animals, and it holds them to account. And just as like a little bit of happy news, we did see that a really positive impact with rehoming a particular group of animals from an institute that were used in sort of like a repetitive thing. So every year animals were being bred for this purpose, used, then killed, bred, used, killed. We came in and we started rehoming those animals afterwards. And after we did that twice, they ended up replacing the use of those animals entirely. So no animals are bred for that anymore. So we don't have to rehome any animals. And I think that actually coming in and rehoming them helped give those animals value and helped put pressure on that institute to do better and be better. So yeah, I guess in short, there's a lot of positives from it. And I mean, from that campaign, NZAVS and Hoo Ha together have successfully rehomed nearly 400 animals. And I mean, right now in my office, I'm in my dining room right now because my office is full of rats. I got 54 rats. It's now down to 44 from a university who were able to be rehomed. And it was one of those scenarios where it was like, we need somewhere for them to go, or they're going to be euthanized. And so I changed my office into a rat room. So there's 44 rats in there at the moment, and I think they're pretty cute ambassadors for the work that we do. And it's nice to be able to share with our supporters, like, these are some real animals that have had their lives changed because of people in New Zealand caring.
That's awesome. I remember, I think rats and mice are, they're not animals that we as vegans discount, but, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, rodents, they're creepy, and, you know, and it was actually, I think it must have probably been maybe the first, I wouldn't say bunch of rats, but yeah, back in 2020, when we happened to be at Hoo-Ha, and it was the first release of 50 rats, I think, and I found that very, very confronting. We went to this beautiful sanctuary where there were the baby horses skipping around and all of this, you know, the cute little baby goats, and it was the rats. One of the vets there said would like me to go and see the rats, and I found that very confronting, and that really helped me to face that these were real animals, very snuggly, sociable creatures that absolutely need fighting for. So it's awesome.
Now, yeah, I'll just, Rachel, did you have anything quickly to add to that?
I think, well, at least in Australia, it's still not mandatory for dogs and cats who are suitable to be rehomed after their use. So I think it shows that we're really off somewhere if we can't even get that at this point from phasing out animal research is still quite a long-term achievable goal. So I think that the right to release definitely does have some advantages. We have a profile of Leo the ex-lab cat who was released from a research institute here, and our previous CEO wrote a book about him, and we use that as a kind of children's educational book. And I know last week in one of the states here, there was a push for a right to release bill, and a survivor of animal research was brought to Parliament to meet the politicians who were going to be making the vote on that bill. And I think that definitely has an impact. I myself have a dog that was previously used in research, and I'm bound by a lot of confidentiality things about what I can say, but I just tell everyone and anyone about who I come across, about where she was obtained from, and I also make it clear that her siblings are still in that situation. So I don't want to perpetuate that everything is fine and all animals are being rehomed, but I feel like those faces and those individuals really raise attention that these animals are being used, because there's just so limited understanding that dogs and cats are being used. And I wish it could apply more broadly than dogs and cats, but that seems to be the stage we're at the moment.
Yeah, it's great to have all those perspectives on it. Now, I said actually she's got to head away. So what we'll quickly do is we'll just jump to the final one of the points. One of the main points of bringing everyone together today was not just to talk about what's happening in animal-based research and testing, but also to provide a bit of hope, hopefully. Hope for the animals. And in that sort of vein, I would love to hear about some of the campaigns or projects you're currently running, and how each of us can become that hope for the animals and get involved with them. And so, Aysha, before you have to sprint away, would you like to share what you are currently up to and how we can get involved?
Well, the FDA Modernization Act is one of the main policy that we're working on, and it really is pretty brilliant in the sense that it doesn't end animal testing, because no law that tries to end animal testing is going to pass today. But it just changes the word in the law that requires animal testing for drugs. It changes the word animal to non-clinical, and non-clinical in this sense means before human testing. So just by changing the word, you expand the type of methods that can be used. So that is the first step to opening up the door to spurring more and more innovation in this more human relevant testing methods, and to spurring an industry to move more in that direction. And so, I'm hoping that other countries can start taking up similar, think of drafting similar types of policies that just expand. It's in the name of innovation. That's it. That's what it is. No one can say that, we need to stagnate. So this helps innovation, and that's what every country says they're about. And they don't want to stagnate, and laws like this help prevent stagnation in science and even economic stagnation. So the fact that it's really moving quickly through the Senate and past the House here in the United States is very good news. And I think it's a sort of a ground. It will be a major precedent here in the United States. So that's good news. And for everyone else, I really do suggest that we really do. I hate to say this. I mean, God, I love the animals, and I wish the world would wake up. Just because of the suffering of animals alone, I wish that was enough, but it hasn't been. And so if I could just ask for everyone here to please just get a few sound bites in. You can come to our website, learn a little bit about the failure rate of animal testing, and learn a little bit about these human relevant testing methods. Share that information. Just get the knowledge out that shows to the public that animal research is an old, archaic, ineffective system. We need to move towards the future of medicine and health, and that is not animal experimentation. So if you can help us do that, help all the organizations kind of, really get that message out, I think that will go a long way.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for that.
Thank
And the link to the website is in the comments to you below, to your side, wherever it is at the moment. Here, there, everywhere. I always forget where it is. So please do go over to contemporarysciences.org and yes, support Aysha's work. And thank you just so much for joining us today. I know you've got to head off, but you've just hit the nail on the head every time I feel at the moment with these answers. So it's just been so wonderful having your insights.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Like I said, I've been in this world for more than 30 years, and I've seen it all from every direction. And I really do have hope that it's going to be, if nothing else, that this human self-centered need, is what's going to drive the change. We're going to do it for our own benefit. And I think that is ultimately what's going to end animal experimentation. Thank you guys very much. Okay.
Thank you. And hopefully we'll catch you on here again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Well, as we started out I started out the conversation today about anthropocentrism and that whole, so much of our general public have that worldview that everything revolves around us humans, and that's what we're going to have to use to advocate in this term. So yeah, it's been wonderful having that. So Tara, do you want to go next with what NZAVS has got going on and how we can get on to support you?
Sure, we have a lot going on all the time. We have so many campaigns running at once. I think the hub of everything that we do is our website, and we are working on updating that at the moment, so it'll be even better because we do want it to be like the go-to place to learn absolutely everything you need to about animal experimentation in New Zealand. So I do want to kind of echo what Aysha said. I think spreading the word, particularly on the invalidity of the animal model, is such a great way to help, because it does contribute to the removal of the social license of animal experimentation. And we know that as a society, when we rip away the social license, that's basically when things change. We've seen it throughout history. So if people out there can help contribute to the removal of that, then that is beautiful. We are constantly working on new resources to help give people the tools and information to do exactly that. And one of the best ways, like I've said earlier, to get access to that information is by signing up to our mailing list. But I do think our most important campaign at the moment, and possibly ever, is our Striking at the Source campaign. And it is the one that I'm spending the most time on, mostly behind the scenes, meeting with people and trying to build those relationships behind the scenes to give it the best chance of succeeding when we actually get to Parliament as possible. And a big way people can support that is staying up to date with what we're doing, because there's going to be a lot a lot coming out, especially in the next couple of months, of how people can actually use their voice to help create change, whether it be, if you're based in New Zealand, meeting with the local MP or writing a letter and sending it in, things like that. We will be calling upon people to help in many different ways. So the best way you can find out about it is follow us on social media, sign up to our mailing list, and just keep an eye on things, because we will need so much help soon. And obviously the more help we have, the louder our voices and the more chance we have of actually helping animals. So that's pretty much the main thing.
Thank you
Awesome.
so much.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for everything that you do. I don't know if you have, or whether you haven't seen the documentary Milked yet. Tara is actually in that, and we watched it with a family that we were living with at the time when it came out last year. And one of the biggest reactions that we saw from family here in New Zealand was of the fistulated cow that was in the documentary, and they were just sitting up and like, what? Who knows this goes on, and that's the problem. People don't know that it goes on. Just imagine the outcry there would be if we had fistulated humans just, walking around. I mean, it would be a very, very different scenario, wouldn't it? That would be barbaric. But
once again, link is in the description comments there. it's in the comments there, folks, so you can get to NZAVS. And yes, the newsletter, I think it does pop up straight away, so you can sign up for that. It's a great newsletter. I admit I'm a bad one for not subscribing to newsletters, because
I do. I subscribe to the newsletter.
We subscribe to so many organizations at the moment for collaborating with everyone, but NZAVS is the one that I haven't unsubscribed from, because that is the one that I feel I have to keep up to date with.
So much going on.
Yeah. And talking about newsletters as well, I know Humane Research Australia also has a great newsletter too. And so, Rachel, what campaigns can we get involved with for you folks?
Yeah, I guess similar as NZAVS, we're kind of part behind the scenes and as a resource, and then part public facing campaigns. So the campaigns that we're focused on at the moment is primate experimentation, for swim test, inhalation studies, and we have some resources on dissection in schools, and general campaigns really focused on increasing transparency and funding. So if you have a look on our website, we've got a campaign section. We've also got an e-news, as you mentioned, to sign up to from the homepage. We've got a few social media channels to follow. We share a lot of content on there, podcast, whole range of things. We quite often will profile case studies. So we're really looking at research that's being conducted, why we think it shouldn't have been conducted, what could have been conducted in its place, to really emphasize that the system isn't working, and we'll have actions associated with them. So really the best thing to do is sign up, and you'll get notifications when you can take those actions. So that's probably the advice I would give. If you're based in Australia, the other thing is we have a initiative, the Humane Charities List. So that's a directory of health charities that are not using animals in research, because people may often want to choose to donate to a health charity and not be aware of where that money may be heading. So that's also a resource that I would suggest that people use, because we may not think about that when we're donating at tax time or other periods of the year, but that money could be funding animal research inadvertently.
Well, yeah. Well, that's a great initiative to have. And Tara, have you guys got something like that in the works? Because that'd be great to know about here too. I know
Tara's got me. We've moved to Pathfinder instead of KiwiSaver over here, because any New Zealanders watching this, KiwiSaver is support. If you support, transfer to Pathfinder, and then you know that your money, your contribution will be put in the right areas and not ones that you would rather not be contributing to.
That's the only KiwiSaver investment scheme that actively doesn't invest in any sort of animal testing. So it's a pretty good one to be aware of, because I think a lot of Kiwis don't think about that when they think about their KiwiSaver. They just think, it's chugging along, it's getting ready for my retirement. But in the meantime, while that's all happening, it can actually be funding animal testing. So making that ethical KiwiSaver switch is a great action to do, and it can have a huge impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it goes to show with everything that we do as vegans, even your donations, doing your investment for your retirement, everything that we do is all learning process and trying to find out where carnism and that sort of culture has sort of come in and still, taken over and lead to the use of animals. And so I can't thank you enough, for both of you, and Aysha, who's already left, for joining us today. And it's just been so wonderful to have your insight and knowledge. I feel like my advocacy for animals within animal-based research and testing now can be improved, and I have a bit of a better focus of how I want to move forward with it. So hopefully our audience has been finding this too. We've had some wonderful stars out there commenting away, and so it's been great to have all your feedback. Esther is just quickly asking.
We can find that out for you, Esther, because our Geordie Casamajana, he would know all about that, wouldn't he?
Yeah, asking about appropriate organisations, etc., for pensions, etc., in the UK. We'll ask Geordie. He is the writer of Ethical Vegan, which you might have read, and so he had a big old debacle with this issue, and so hopefully we can find out from him. So we'll try and keep you posted on that if we can. But lastly, did anyone else have any closing statements before we sort of we finish this for the day? I realize I've kept you much longer than planned.
No, just a massive thank you from my end. Thank you to you both for organising this. I think it's a really awesome conversation to be had, and I hope that it was helpful for a lot of people. But yeah, thank you for organising it, and lovely to see you, Rachel, and Aysha, who's gone now.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting us on and taking on this issue, because it does get overlooked, I feel, sometimes, and there's so many animal exploitation.
Oh no.
From my end, too much going on my computer, I think, but thank you very much, and all the best with your work as well, because I think, as I said, there's so many issues that are worth focusing on.
Oh, definitely. As I said to Aysha this morning before we started, I've been buying cruelty-free cosmetics since 1986, and here I still am, but there's so much more that we need to be doing. Please, everyone, check out the websites that we've got here in the chat, because
link below.
if you don't know about the forced swim test, that is something that both Tara and Rachel have been campaigning heavily for, and against for abolishing in their respective countries. And also we had a little trouble hearing Rachel at the start when she was talking about the animals being forced to smoke as well. So
I should give a quick call out for that. We have a website, Forced to Smoke, humaneresearch.org.au/forward/forced to smoke, or if you just type in forced to smoke, you'll see our campaign with a video and a whole range of information on there.
Brilliant. That was just, I couldn't believe that. It was just awful.
Please do check that out. And once again, so the links are all in the comments. And so, to get to that campaign, if you open up the humaneresearch.org one, and then, go on the campaigns tab, it'll take you there too. So hopefully everyone can find everything that they need. And they've enjoyed this as much as we have. We'll close it off for now, and just I want to thank everybody for turning up and watching this.
Lovely to have
thank you guys so much for joining us and just enlightening us with so much more of this information that we need to keep the fight going strong. And we just really enjoyed your company today. And so we'll end the stream off there, I say.
Yes, have a wonderful day, evening, wherever you are. And thank you for sticking with us with the technical issues, Rachel. I'm so glad that you managed to make it work in the end.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.